Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I'm on with the wonderful RJ Downard, and we're going to talk about what else? The mammal reptile transition, the most important one, the most important
The
transition,
killer.
and probably some other things. This one's a bit off the cuff. I didn't really prepare a bunch of questions, uh, but
We can wing it.
so I've been reading your book, Evolution Slam Dunk. Link to that will be provided below in the
Yeah,
description.
and as a shameless plug, I will ask everybody to buy it.
It's a great book. I really enjoy it. It's very good. Uh,
Yeah,
and so
I put a lot of work in it.
you mentioned to me the website Creation Wiki, which I have seen a few times before. I actually used them as the source for determining what the different terminology in baraminology is, like apobaramins and holobaramins. And so
It's a secondary site.
yeah.
I'm just looking in my bibliography since I happen to have a different thing. All are to them directly. Itself, I got a whole slew of them from about 2007 on. And they are a full-blown, pretty much of wackaloon young Earth creationism. So they'll accept as legit stuff that won't pass muster necessarily over in Answers in Genesis. They'll be much more on that. And this Krieger guy, who's one of their various authors, and most of their stuff is anonymous, did a thing on the reptile-mammal transition. It's the only analysis where the guy went through all these examples that were brought up by Kathleen Hunt in the Talk Origins archive from the 1990s, which is old stuff, but still it was a useful work, and it had a bunch of citation stuff, largely to general mammal work. She only occasionally cited technical material. Nothing wrong with it. It was actually a remarkably accurate thing, and there were only a few cases of things where the paleontology had passed her by, but 1990s, you're not surprised at that. And the other times where, boy, she got it dead on target. She was anticipating where the stuff was going. Anyway, Krieger had done an earlier piece that I, by happenstance, I print out hard copy. There's an advantage to hard copy because it's not available anywhere online anymore. It's been vaporized. But he took that 2003 version and tweaked it a bit. And you're going to be reading in the book the versions that he went. He kind of like forgot what he had written 5 years earlier, and he was good. And as you noticed in the spot where he was thinking that some of these little transitional double jaw jointed things were just varieties of mouse, and you're going, what?
Yeah, that was.
Oh no!
That
If
was
you ever look at the
shameful.
anatomy,
No
oh
one,
no.
no one would make that kind of mistake who actually knows anything about rodents. No one would make
Well,
that kind of
but
mistake.
again, you hit the nail on the head. If you made a long list of things that Krieger knows nothing about, rodents would be one of them. The thing is, I give him a tiny cut of slack. Even as late as 2008, it wouldn't have been easy to find a lot of the technical literature online. Certainly not in 2003. But when we got down to the 2008 version, all he was doing was citing John Woodmarapp and a couple of these other people that had already done, including the Truth in Science thing, which you're going to get to. That's that thing you brought up about oligophysis. That's from Truth in Science. They're a British creationist bunch that also tried to be sciencey, and they are the one and only bunch who stepped perilously close to that little bit about the embryology of mammals, where we can see that we start out with the reptile layout and then it turns into that in our ear. And this, of course, has been known since the 1830s, and I make a big deal out of it. And they stepped perilously close to that data because they cited a work that they acted as though it was a denial in this. However, that you'll go into all the little bits about how they're really straining at gnats, because when you actually dive into the work, they're misusing its content, and other work by those same authors was clarifying a lot of the situation. And I learned a lot more about the developmental biology of mammal ears as a result of reading the work that they themselves had brought to my attention, because they were bringing it up. It's very perilous to bring up technical literature, because odds are, if you read the full text, you'll not only see where they're screwing up, but you'll also learn way more. And you'll find out, wow, that's actually kind of interesting. It's odd they didn't notice that.
Oh yeah.
Creation Wiki is
oh, sorry. Oh, for Oligokyphus, they made a very strange mistake. Well, I have to say, they're not, as far as I can see, it doesn't look like they don't cite anything that's not in the article that they're critiquing. Well, except for they have a few references down here at the very
Oh yeah, well, and it's all to
bottom.
creationist stuff. The Krieger
yeah.
piece is very superficial. In fact, everything at Creation Wiki is extremely superficial. That they are simply redactors. They are copyists of crap that they have picked up otherwise. And the only reason why Krieger's thing has an element of originality about it is because nobody had taken on that rather daunting task of actually plowing through the information that even was known in the 1990s. Now, of course, it's got even worse. That, you know, the sheer thicket of material. Try going through that list, which you'll be reading full blown. I have them. I think there's like 40 different texts, and I got number 4, number 29, number 30, number 31, number 32. So you can kind of keep track of it and follow through on there. That I document how there's just no abrupts at which something is happening where, whoa, that's sure different than what had been before. It's always little microevolutionary changes, and in some cases they're even able to pin down the genetics of what's causing the variation. You'll find that a little bit later when you bump into David Kopej and the kind of the tweak that he tries to do, where he brings up a taxa and he's trying to make points that he's way out of his field as a creationist astrophysicist. The one that got fired from the Jet Propulsion Lab. And he was apparently such an annoying prick that, boy, people, judging from his website and the kind of snarks that he's labeling at people, you go, how they stood him that long is beyond me, because apparently he was trying to evangelize everybody. He was just annoying. And they finally said, you know, you're not being terribly productive here, and you're just bye, good day. And he was fired, and then he had a big cause celeb on it, and they went through the courts, and the court said, yeah, they were okay in firing him. It's perfectly fine.
I'm sure, you know, Ben Stein has heard his story about, oh no, he was another creationist fired from evil academia for not being an
they don't even have to worry. Stein doesn't bother about it anymore. He's moved on to other crap. But the Discovery Institute just has a long set of posts where they just go ballistic over this guy. And never once do they ever mention that he's a young Earth creationist. But, oh yeah, he's the young Earth creationist. In fact, I keep on adding swaths of Kopej to the website all the time. Detail fiddlers, and he's a snarky detail fiddler. So what he does is he'll read the current technical literature, which he actually keeps close on. So he's very source work. This is not a secondary redactor. But then he makes snarky comments and nasty little snipes about it, and and you just get really annoyed at the fellow. And you'll see an example of it in Slam Dunk, because he does that with this particular taxa that he's fiddling with, and I pull him apart and point out how he's stepping around the relevant information, and he doesn't think through what he thinks happens and all that. You know, it's the usual stick. And that's it's really interesting that I didn't realize until I did the book. All the people who try to be detail fiddly, not a single intelligent designer will step close to the data stream, not one. And then when you get down to the brick that I dropped on Michael Denton, you've already, I think I've seen a little bit of Denton in the earlier chapters before you get to Woodmarat. But I saved the best for last, because that's where he's got his 2016 analysis. And it's just a corker, because for somebody who has that much data under his belt, documented work, he can't possibly claim he can't find this information, because hell, I found the information. Mouse click. You know, if I can do it, so could he. That glib with the information, and to step around stuff that's in his own sources. Boy, this is just sad. In that respect, I'll give props to the Kriegers of the world. They try, they fail. They're hilariously wrong. At a whack. But everybody over at Intelligent Design Lands basically says, yeah, there's all this data out there, and we're not going to discuss any of it. And it's design, and I'm not really going to bother too much about it. Yeah, so that's I call them creationism light in the old book, and that's a fair nod. Yeah. Denton also is unusual because he's one of the few non-religious. An agnostic. Whether he stays that way, I don't know. But I'm willing to give him that as a thing. He said, well, if he says he's an agnostic, I'll give him that nod. I mean, he's also got his head in the
I have no problem, you know, saying that. I know plenty of atheists who have very weird beliefs, you know, who say very weird things.
Oh, yeah.
we were just talking about Maher today.
Yeah,
He's an
Bill Maher,
anti-vaxxer.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah, at
it's
least
just
he's pro astrology. That I don't even think he understands that much about evolution. He'll say, "Well, of course there's been evolution. Have you seen a monkey?" And I go, yeah. But then he'll say, but only God can make a tree when he's in environmentalist mode. And so one of these days, Maher can sit down and have a discussion with Maher as to what Maher thinks. But I'm not entirely sure I would want to be there to watch.
The point is, I have no problem calling him, agnostic or whatever. It's just that it's kind of hard for me to call them that when they're playing on God's team.
but Denton has never done that. The intelligent design world that he frequents is very non-overtly religious. They keep all of it. They all talk sciencey stuff, although a few of them, especially if they're doing it at a religious college, will put a few little Bible quotes in, at the tail end of the lecture as they're winding up and going for the Q&A. Denton doesn't fall within that frame, and that was true for the 85 book, Evolutionary Theory in Crisis. I always like to pronounce it that way, give it a little bit of a ring. And then the new book for 2016. Dun, dun. Yeah. And he's got that a patina about him, but it puts him in a very narrow frame. David Berlinski is apparently non-religious, a secular Jew, and just an idiot. He's an oddball, and so he's a natural contrarian. He doesn't like Einstein. There's a whole bunch of stuff that he dislikes. And so he's got a weird little worldview of stuff. Yeah, that kind of gets lost in the shuffle, some of these Big Bang things that they don't like.
I've heard some. That's very interesting. I've been recently coming across people who have been hating on Einstein. I don't get what the deal with that is.
In fact, I've got a brief reference later on in the book. I tried to put everything in the kitchen sink in Slam Dunk for anybody that if they didn't know diddly squat about the issues, they're going to at least get the benchmarks of a whole bunch of stuff that they can go, I didn't know about that. Because a lot of people won't have followed it at all. But the main star attraction is the reptile-mammal transition and all the stuff connecting up to it. But the weird little Big Bangism and anti-Einsteinism is a little cottage industry, and it intersects with creationism, but is not identical to it. And they're usually the kind of folk that in the old days would be doing mimeograph sheets full of caps. And now they're doing it all online. And there's just a small cadre. You could probably gather together all the serious anti-Einsteiners and the anti-Big Bangers outside of young Earth creationism in a small meeting room. I mean, they're not that many. And they're really tanks in any fundamental sense. But anti-evolutionism in that larger context is anything but trivial, because it actually affects stuff. And you've got people in Congress, and you have people who are currently running cabinet departments, and very likely the Vice President of the United States, who would share most of these tropes, although they do it is part of the tricky thing. What I hope you're getting already in the book, applying the TIP methodology really tightly, that where you find out brainhood is that you can see it in their scholarship. You can see it in how they're using sources, what they mention and what they don't. What they leave out is often more important than what they put in. And if you can find them stepping around a thing to where, how could you possibly not know this? It was in the source you cited. That's where the scholarship can be very rigorous. And all of this is independent of content. That's what makes source methods analysis, like logical analysis, so powerful. Logical analysis can't tell you if your assumptions are true and false, but it can analyze if your conclusions follow or not from your assumptions. And source methods is something or you didn't. If you cited it, did it say what you claim it did or not? Is the quotation out of context or not? All of that's independent of whether the content's true or false. Then you can go beyond that. If you're screwing up at that basic level, you don't even need to worry about if the content's true or false. But then if beyond that, if you want the frosting on the cake and the cherry on top of the sundae, you can go into, and by the way, here's the reason why we would be arguing that the content is in fact true or false, and explain it all. And you do it by doing it. Yeah. I'm doing that pretty well in the book. I've gotten
with Woodmarap, who didn't know what an apomorphy was.
He couldn't even define the terms well.
Construct.
It's that's always the thing when you get jargonism. Have you got to the part where I go after Denton on the ants?
Yeah, ants, wasps, and feathers. Yeah, I got past all
Yeah.
that.
The thing that pissed me off about him when I read the paragraph, because I was going to mention it because of Spica Mirma that predicted wasp ant, and he didn't discuss it in the 85 book, and lo and behold, he steps around it spectacularly in the 2016 book. But what bothered me about it, and I made a big deal out of it in the book, is here he dribbles this paragraph of jargon and never explains what the hell
Oh
it is to
yeah,
his readers.
yeah, I remember that.
I know enough in my own writing where people have said, "What the hell you use that term? What does that mean?"
Hmm.
And you realize, of course, when you're using those sorts of stuff, not only do you need to explain it for people, but then you need to understand it. And when I started ferreting through the terms that were in those paragraphs, not only did I discover way more about ants and all the reasons why Denton was not very close to ants. He shouldn't have brought this subject up. This is not helping his case. That it now brought out so much stuff where down to that stupid metapleural gland and all that. Now I've got my brain primed that now any technical paper that pops down the line on metapleural glands in ants and their systematics, I'm going to be paying attention to, because we still don't know what the hell they do.
Yeah, I mean, if you know, unless you're writing a paper that, or yeah, that's addressed to other people in your field, if you're going to write a book for a lay public,
General public, yeah.
you darn need to explain the terms involved. You can't just drop. You can't just drop these words on them, and you know it's ridiculous. But to bring this all back around to
good.
to Oligokyphus in the Creation Wiki article, they say, quote, that Oligokyphus and Caeantotherium are clearly 100% mammals with no evidence of reptilian traits, which is funny because Oligokyphus, I haven't looked up Caeantotherium yet, has a double jaw.
Well, it is.
So
yeah, he's mushed together stuff that what he may think, if he looks superficially at it, all of them look kind of mouse-like. The mouse, Morganucodon, is a little itty bitty critter. It's fitted in your hand, and you probably go, "Oh, this is a cute little thing." But they all look pretty much alike until you start looking down below. What really amazes me, and you'll be getting down in the other section, is about the jaw shape. It's one of those things where it was like a duh moment. All this time I've been staring in the face, and I didn't realize the significance of it. I had seen pictures of the classic mammal thing, and you look at the side picture. It's rather stereotypical thing with the zygomatic arch coming up, and you can see all that. You can see the gradualism just from that part. It really was staring me in the face, but I never noticed it until it was called attention, become a lot of stuff, was what happens when you look down on it from the top down. Distinctive about these early critters is how they have this incredibly long, narrow jaw, bulge where the skull is. Really, it just splays out like whoa, and so it looks almost like a penis. It's ridiculous proportions, very different from what you look at when you're looking at a dinosaur. They can have a very strong but long thing, and of course our own skull is basically an oval. We don't have a very strong jaw bite. And when I discovered that shape is adaptive, it's a perfect jaw form for an insectivore. And the very act of going chomp, 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 chomp pulls the bug into the mouth with that very long dental arcade. And all of those teeth are squishing down on the insect, and it works just beautiful for that. And I didn't know anything about that background data, and it took me a lot of background research in a lot of obscure journals that I stumbled on in the course of answering the question, why the hell the masseter muscle? How did that come about? Because Michael Denton, as you'll see later on in the book, tries to argue that no one can even imagine an adaptive Darwinian scenario to explain this arrangement. And I'm going, oh, bullpucky. And so that was just so simultaneously, when you get at the source level and look up the taxa directly, it's easy to do now in Google land. Sometimes if I Google a taxa, you'll get a dry well. You'll find this damn creation, the general wiki article that tells the name and a bit about it and maybe the period it lives, and there's no technical papers, there's no links, you're just, excuse me, boring. So sometimes you have to poke around to find, and if you start hunting around stuff, you can find at times where it will come up as a subject often in a systematic article where it's about mammals in general, and it's one of the taxa that's listed in a cladogram, for example. And so you can find things where you can gradually build up the data set. And to do in any of this background research, these are the lessons of research, young man, is always pay attention to the date. You see a paper that's, oh, it's a beautiful taxonomy paper, but it's 2003. Be worthless, but it's 2003. We're living in 2017. What's been done since? So now you can get that paper and you can put that in your bookmark collection, but then you want to kind of do a search on that. So maybe take the title of that paper and then do a Google search on that to find out who's mentioned it since. Then you may also stumble upon the fact that some stupid creationist will have latched onto it. It'll pop up in some little paper at Answers in Genesis or the Institute for Creation Research that you might never have known about. Now you can see how they're looking at the material. And so that's the way I go through this for all of TIP, because my goal is, arrogant bastard that I am, is that the idea behind the TIP project is to do something literally no one had done before, which is all the relevant technical literature constantly updated with the latest stuff, plus what have all anti-evolutionists said about it? What they've already cited and what have they not done? And nobody has ever before, no one's cataloged it. Talk Origins has tons of stuff, but it's all fragmented and separated. There's no master bibliography. There's no unified field for you to look at. And it's also not a moving target. I've been demonstrating, and you've experienced it firsthand, and I'm happy to know that Pelagia material, he uses me as a resource to be able to look up stuff. And I know that's actually a great honor, because my website is not the easiest thing to navigate around yet. I'm still very basic on that. But still, the fact that people that have gotten ahead of the game, now you have a confidence level. So when you brought up that quote on that bird fossil, I was able to pull you up to speed on it and bring you up to date on it, save you a lot of work, so that you can then build a better argument, because you don't have to spend all your time reinventing the wheel on that particular thing.
Good old Proto-Avis.
Yeah, that one is, it's such a problematic one. In fact, I discussed the one, if you need for people who can't afford my book, get it. But if you can't, 3 macroevolutionary episodes, free for anybody downloading the damn thing at the website. It's over in the, I think it's got a separate heading, or it's in the other stuff category. The book, and I think the bibliography references are contained in it. I'm not sure how I organized the PDF, but if not, there's a separate one for that. Anyway, it's about a 400-page book altogether with all the references and stuff that I did around 2005, where I condensed, oddly, at the request of David Berlinski, of all people. There we'll have to go at some time. Yeah, I had an interaction, strange interactions with Berlinski. This was a weird tale that we'll have to do a whole separate show on sometime. But anyway, I wrote 3 macroevolutionary episodes, and I couldn't get it published anywhere. For one, because I'm a nobody. You know, I'm just a schlump with a BA in history out in the middle of nowhere at that time. But I'm still quite proud of it. And there are only a few little micro blips that I would need to revise, that we now know a bit more about the phyla. Some of the phyletic classifications have changed a little bit. And the other one, of course, is just a burnish on the cap. I was already pointing out in that about the digit issue with the birds. And that there were 2 options. One, that you had an ancestor form that had lost this digit, then that one, and that would produce the bird form from a dinosaur thing. There were none known. Actually, there have now been a few that have lost the thumb node that have been found in the theropods since then, but that was, but the other one was the one that I think Wagner was his name, or Muller, came up with, the frame shift theory, that you have these Anlagen. What happens is the thing that you call thumb has to do with a certain amount of genes that are activated that make that the thummy thing. And what can happen is it can jump to the second Anlagen and make the first digit that one instead. And that's exactly what they've worked out. There's been a whole bunch of technical literature over quite a few years where they've actually confirmed. First, they did it with chicken feet because they were easier to work with, because the full digits are showing up in the embryo easier. The bird, as anybody who's seen a chicken wing can see, that everything's all mushed together, that it's actually tough to do the genetic work on that. But scientists are a pesky lot, and they actually work the thing out with the wing part as well. So it's essentially now a done deal that there was a digit frame shift, and I think you'll find that mentioned. In fact, they've been working through a lot of the digit frame shifts that have gone on beyond just the theropods in digit reduction in our dinosaurs generally. So the science has moved on that. And yet you still got the Fred Hoyle of bird evolution.
Mm-hmm.
So just been digging his heels on that and getting farther and farther behind the data stream. I have harsh words to say about Fiducia. He's probably a perfectly nice person, but he really has proven to be one of those that just has these blind spots. He comes from a morphological tradition. He's an ornithologist, not a paleontologist, and he doesn't do cladistics. Ooh, he hates cladistic analysis, and about the only time it ever comes up is to criticize it. Well, excuse me, but within my lifetime, cladism started out as the odd little thing Hennig came up with after the Second World War, and then boy, the paleontologists found this was the killer app because it isn't based on evolution. And ironically, Denton gets sucked into this maw in anti-evolutionism because here was this new systematic technique that didn't require evolutionary assumptions. Well, this means they are rejecting Darwinism. No, they've got an independent checker tool. It's like isochron datings in radiometric dating. There were a thing that you can analyze anything with cladism. You can analyze Louis XIV chairs. You can analyze movies. You can analyze rock formations. Anything can be analyzed cladistically. All it is you have to have character states that you can render numerically, and work out relationships and similarities and differences. So everything in cladism is not ancestor descendant. It's how similar or different is it from something to another. And then when you're looking at and phylogeny, ideally, a true phylogeny will be one that is most parsimonious when viewed cladistically, that the character states that are changing involve things that make sense developmentally, that there's some convergences, but those are going to stand out in the whole framework. And the cladistic analysis puts it into, because it numericizes everything, and you can measure distances that way. Am I fairly summarizing the way this is being used and how you've encountered this stuff in the sciences? I think I got it now.
We so thus far in my college career, we because I've been taking mostly generalized broad classes because I'm only a sophomore. Because the first year or the first semester of biology I had was like molecular biology. Then it was evolution and a few other things, and so we kind of touched on it, but that was just within the context of this one chapter, and then kind of moved on from that. So and then this year it's micro, which is interesting but very difficult. I've come across some very strange little things. Like we're looking up information on planktomycetes a little while back. Also,
oh yeah, a bunch of that stuff that what you mentioned in your book that I hadn't spotted, and I think so I was adding material into TIP that way because it's those weird little corners of life that are like the ones where nobody studied this much, or they may be very difficult to find. They may be little tiny things to deal with, and they don't have a fossil record, so they're looking at unusual things. But anything that's out of the ordinary that way, probably when they delve into it more and more, is going to reveal lots and lots. And it may, and when you get up to systematics level, they're going to be using cladism. They're going to be character stating everything and organizing that stuff. Oh, by the way, that Woodmarapp chapter that you're diving into, that one is directly dealing with the cladistic analyses. 3 cladism papers on the reptile mammal transition. And as I point out in it, the one thing Woodmarapp never does is a cladistic analysis. He's just taking numbers and just lumping them together and adding them up when he shouldn't be. Because when you look at a cladistic analysis, if you've ever looked at the back end of things, you're going to see things that probably run for 5 or 6 pages, and they are character states 1 to how many, and there's like 0 parentheses 0 1 2 or 0 -1 0 1. There's a whole bunch of different things there. And what Woodmarapp made the mistake of thinking is that he thought those things were numbers, but they're not. They're just placeholders. You could call them A, B, and C. You could call them frick, frack, and nummy-mump. But it's hard to add up frick, frack, or nummy-mump. So you want to just produce arbitrary number values. And the idea that a 0 is it's just different from the 1 or the 2 state. A 2 state is not necessarily 1 more than the 1 state and 2 more than the 0 state. Sometimes the ancestral state will be the 0 and the derived one will be the 1. Sometimes the ancestral will be the 1 and the 0 is a derived state, the absence of something. And so Woodmarapp was missing category mistakes right off the bat. He was trying to add up something that wasn't a number. Numbers. This is bad. Yeah, Woodmarapp is just a fabulous to reason.
Yeah, he's a very interesting character. I also looked up Cayantotherium. Turns out it as well is not 100% mammal. Surprise, surprise.
Oh, it's on the borderline there. Oh, okay.
Just like
I'm thinking of Cunotherium. Yeah, Cayantotherium. Yeah, it's a different one. See, there again, I'm an old fart. I often get confused if they got something. It starts with a K. Blah blah blah. Yeah, it is a different one. I was thinking of Cunotherium. Morganucodon and Cunotherium are just at that little cusp point farther down the road. Even Morganucodon still has some traces of the older mode on there, but it was the best they could do at the time.
Cayantotherium.
But they're all mouse-like, right?
Oh, as someone who works with lots of mice, pretty sure I can distinguish between a mouse and a non-mouse. Interestingly, fun fact, rats from squirrels, because squirrels have a post-orbital bar little process.
Ooh, yeah.
So that's a fun fact for you guys.
Yeah, the same thing. I called attention to a little bit, probably in an earlier section of the book, so you probably already bumped into this, the one where Denton was trying to make such a big deal about the marsupial dogs and how similar they were by convergence, when in fact, if you looked at the details, you can easily tell them apart. Yeah, they look dog-like, but the moment you start looking at their detailed anatomy, no, one's a marsupial dog and the other is a placental dog, and the teeth differences and the skull details, stuff that just jump right out at you, even to a layman. That somehow Denton said, oh, they all look dog-like to me. Well, you must not be looking close enough, Michael. You need a new pair of glasses.
Yeah. So Cayantotherium has a double jaw because it's a tritylodont. So it has not quite.
You got the remnants of its articular quadrate, which is the old reptile jaw that we all are born with, and then up above that is the masseter muscle that's linking. It's now becoming the dominant jaw form between the squamosal bone up in the skull and the dentary bone, which is our one great big thing that cleverly has the teeth. Dentary, and that's the distinctive feature of the mammal. And so all of these ones in the turnover are the ones that are, there's no half-formed anything. Everything is always fully formed, and creationists just get all over the top on this. Well, it's fully formed. Well, of course it is, because it's functional, damn it. Evolution requires everything to be functional. You don't have something that's a partial thing, and then suddenly it leaps. No, it's got to be doing something all the way down the line. And so this was the one that I want everybody to be aware of, the fact that all of these double-jawed critters are ones that were directly predicted on evolutionary grounds. Nobody had the slightest idea. There's no living animal that has that double jaw layout. And that it was entirely based on evolution, where Robert Broom, prickly little son of a bitch that he was, but also a very astute guy, kind of an oddly theistic, quirky evolutionist, which I think I had a little blurb in there about some of his background. Fascinating character. Anyway, that he deduced that you're going to get from a reptile layout where it has just one jaw hinge to the mammal that has a completely different jaw hinge with different bones in different skull. How do you do that? That the only way it's going to work is to have the reptile layout joined by the new thing, which meant you had to warp the bones around. So it predicted where the bones were repositioned. So the squamosal had to be next to the quadrate, and the dentary bone had to have a process that was parallel to where that little articular bone was. So the new muscle that's formed is parallel to the original muscle, and they're both pulling the same way. Otherwise, you can't have a mess. Now, what's interesting about the mammal layout is on the outside of the jaw, not the inside. We can do this trick so much easier than everybody else. It's because of that. And they've only just now started working out. And I have a blurb later down in the road that there's a species of parrot that has formed a masseter jaw muscle up to the squamazle, and the genes that are involved are our old familiar ones, the bone morphin, sonic hedgehogs, and all that kind of crap. And this is offering clues as to what was going on way over in their distant cousins. It reminds us that these things can pop up convergently in a lot of different contexts, but they need to be adaptive if they're going to take hold. La-di-da. So anyway, I'm jumping in again.
Oh, that's okay. On the similarities between dogs and Thylacinus, Richard Dawkins actually said in his book, The Ancestor's Tale, that I think it was in college. He said he was taking a zoology class, and on the final, it had some of the students had taken the test, and it spread around that a Thylacinus skull, because they had to identify the skulls, was on the test. And so they said, if it looks like a dog skull, it's not a dog skull, it's a Thylacinus. So by the time this had gotten to him, he said the teachers had made it to where, so all the students thought by that point, by the time they got to the test, that if there was a dog-like skull on the test, it would be a Thylacinus. But by the time they got there,
somebody swooped in a dog skull.
Well, the teachers had changed it to where it was actually a dog skull instead of a Thylacinus.
And that, yeah, but you could measure those things. Yeah, and it's very easy to do on a lot of stuff when you look at animals. The problem I think a lot of creationists get at is kind of gawk at it, and it looks sort of like something or other, and they all look kind of alike. In the same way that if I look at when I was looking at 1930s cars, they all look kind of alike to me. And it took a long time before you start being able to recognize what the diagnostic features are that allow you to say, oh, no, that's a Packard. Oh, that's a Duesenberg. And you could literally tell some from others because you now know how to tell them apart. So what seems similar, different in detail, in the same way that people who are sports fanatics, you know, if you try to say, well, all the baseball players are alike, no, they can tell from things, and they can rattle off batting averages and all this other stuff. So, or opera groupies, you know, who can tell within a few seconds who a singer is just by listening to an opera excerpt, and they know their stuff. That's what being an expert means. And every field it's got its stuff, but and in principle, everybody can figure out how to do it, things are, and figure out the rationales for them. And in fact, the more people that get involved in this kind of stuff, never be intimidated by the complexity of it. Everything is rational. The nice thing about science is that it's often detailed. So, you know, when you look at a chart of skeletal bones, there's going to be there's all these little letters around the edges. Oh, there's A and C and G and all. And you look down in the little graph, and cleverly they tell you what they are. Woodmarap thing initially in 2006, I basically had to teach myself taxonomy on the fly, to where I had to identify what the bones were, and I was able to see what they are and to see the comparisons, and then I could figure out what was going on. And I was happy that I got a good compliment from Dr. Lowe from the university, or from the Carnegie in Chicago. He was supplying me with the original papers and all that, and I was in correspondence with him, and I still bump into him every so often. He said, you know, you actually would have made a pretty good system of tests. You were very careful on that. And I go, thank you. I'm trying to, because I'm going at creationists, and I cannot afford to make any mistakes. I've got to have this absolutely bulletproof. So if they're going to find an error in any of my work, boy, are they going to have to hunt for it.
Yeah, I mean, the vast majority of them they have no clue what they're talking about. They never do. I was actually talking to, Savannah and I were talking to a guy, because my favorite Charlie Kennan, he's a creationist who I duel with.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Just for anybody who doesn't know, he came with his group last week, someday, I don't remember. Fortunately, it was very serendipitous, because I had just gotten a shirt from the Cosmic Skeptic. I ordered a shirt from him. It says, "Build the wall between church and state." And so I got the shirt the day before, washed it, and I thought, okay, I'm going to wear this shirt tomorrow. So I put it on.
You're wearing in creationist circles the equivalent of something that says, "Kick me."
Yeah, it's really funny, because, and what was so serendipitous about it was I had geology that day, and so geology ends at noon, and so I could go out the back, which is closer to going home, but I decided to go out the front because I like looking at the big allosaur skeleton that they have in the atrium.
What is the skeleton of again?
It's an allosaurus.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay. Three fingers.
Yeah, they have a really big Allosaurus skeleton in the geology building, which is very nice. They even made a little paper mache stegosaur, which they put next to it. Um, and so I was
Which
going
would be
out there, and I
right.
was
Yeah,
like,
they're Jurassic critters. Yeah,
yeah. So I was
I approve.
I was walking down past the Union, and I saw a group of people, and I thought, oh no, is it today? And so, surely enough, I was
And the
actually going to
Lord
talk.
smiled upon you and brought you in their midst.
Yeah, the fossil genie brought them, I guess. Uh, and so I was going over to talk to Charlie, but as I was walking over there, one guy started yelling at me, saying that you can't. What did he say? He said you can't separate church and state. To which I thought, ooh, theonomic society, no thank you. Uh,
Yeah.
and then and then I got into it with him, and I said, you can't have freedom of religion unless you have freedom from religion. And he said, well, you're just religious as I am. To which a long conversation ensued. Uh, but there was, we were talking about, and this was the guy I was telling you about the day that I had the conversation with him. He just didn't know anything about science. He's making all these claims about science. Didn't doesn't know anything. He didn't know anything about like cell signaling because he was saying all this molecular. It's not like he's doing like pulling a Behe, where he's saying, "Oh, this one little area is intelligently designed." He's saying all of it's intelligently designed, and so
Which is, yeah, Behe doesn't even go that far. But of course, the odds
yeah,
that he's ever read any of Behe's stuff are rather remote.
yeah, I agree. And so I had to explain to him. I took the example of cell signaling, or a general cell signaling, and I said, "Tell me where the intelligence comes in. Where is there an intelligent mechanism? At what point in here does the chemical reaction stop and the supernatural mind start?" And of course, he couldn't tell me. And so I eventually told him, you don't read any technical data." And I said, well, none of you read technical data because all you guys make these claims about science, and yet none of you have any idea what you're talking about. So
Actually, you can draw off my tip work. You can say, Mr. Downard has measured % of you ever cite technical literature, and the 5% of you who do miss 90% of the data. So you can, I'm not guessing, I'm actually measuring.
yeah, it was a mess because the main guy, Charlie, he has like three arguments that he always makes. Three arguments. But his favorite one is he loves Origins or Bust. He just loves that. That's his.
They're addicted to it. If you don't know, if they don't bring up Origins or Bust, then they're really behind the curve. I feel sorry for them. You need to get back and restudy your creationism, because everybody does that. It's their best card. Of course they're going to use that.
Yeah, and I explained.
For those of you who don't know, yeah, the Origins or Bust is the term that I have given to the generic argument of, well, where did life come from? Or where did matter come from? Or where did the universe come from? Or where did fill in the blank come from? And what it is as an apologetic dodge is a way of pushing you back to the question marks, and you ignore all of the things that have exclamation marks, we figured this out part. So things like the reptile-mammal transition and all of that don't depend at all on how life originated. Life could have been the biggest miracle in the history of the universe. God personally, Jesus Christ comes down and makes archaebacteria personally. It doesn't make the reptile-mammal transition data go away billions of years later. Now, if you're dealing with somebody, and this Kennan guy, I guess, is a young Earth creationist, so they're operating from this weird truncated frame, although they probably haven't really thought much about it. The idea that for them, years ago or 6,000 years ago is as distant as 1800. It's just before they were around, and they don't really bother too much about that. But that's why I will constantly prod people on our side, including you and everybody else who listens to this, is you want to make sure where they are on the landscape of their sources. that some people may be intelligent design advocates. Essentially, there are two main fields. You've got your young Earth creationists and the not young Earth creationists. And the not young Earth creationists will be old Earth creationists, which are a dying breed, you, Ross, and people circulating him, and that's about it. And then the intelligent design bunch, who are kind of squishy, they don't bother about chronology part. And they have very different dynamics. I talked about this in the last evolution hour about the smorgasborders. And the people you're dealing with Kennan, and the people who would be siphoning off him are likely to be smorgasborders. That they're picky, choosy little things and tropes and stuff. They don't really look at it much in detail. They're 900 miles away from the technical literature, and so bringing up a lot of things like cell signaling, you might as well have just said blux, nuck, it will be absolutely meaningless to them, because there's nothing in that frame. They think of life in just kind of like dogs and cats, bears, oh my, and the biology they have a vague idea about. Now, some of the others degree of technical expertise, and they are operating at a higher level on the pecking order. But I want everybody jump in.
Yeah, that's at least part of their sources are coming from Mike Riddle and his creationtraining.org website. And I know this because Charlie Kennan actually brought in Mike Riddle against me.
Which was now you've got a hook. Now you got a hook. The moment you start measuring where their data set's coming from, that puts you up at an advantage, because now you can do research on their source base, because it's much more powerful to attack somebody's own material than it is to offer a generic thing where they're saying, well, Richard Dawkins said. Who cares what Richard Dawkins says? No, Mike Riddle says, and here's why Mike Riddle's head is up his ass, and you thought to bring him in as an important figure like he was going to help this matter? You must not have fact check him.
Mike Riddle, he is so far behind the curve. Even Answers in Genesis
doesn't know there's a curve he's behind.
Answers in Genesis. Go ahead.
He's one of their kind of point men, because a lot of the big poobahs at Answers in Genesis are way too above interfering with the hoi polloi. I mean, you're not going to get Ken Ham doing his stuff, but they've got the echelon, and some of them are technical based, but Mike Riddle isn't. He's a lower level apologist who siphons off material, and he's very good at it, and he's very amiable about it, and he has his patter down and all the rest, and he does a good road show. I've seen him in action, and so he's quite pleasant and affable. One thing that I would recommend when you're interacting with such people, do not do it solo. Be the one person in the room or even the cluster of 6 creationists, because they're going to gang up on you, and they might even get into the pot shot mode where question coming from all different sides, and you're trying to keep up. No, if you can have ideally a troika works best, because you've got what you can have is you can have one person, the documenter, that doesn't like to talk at all, but they've got their cell phone there to be able to observe and ideally live stream. And the other two are you and somebody else who know enough about the data stream. You know about the landscape of how anti-evolutionism works. You've read all of my Downard material so that you can be up on the methodology approach. And now you can take brought up by people, and you can get them in an enfilade. You can say, oh, that's a fascinating claim that Joe just made here. Well, you know, the actual context of this, and you're now talking with your evolutionist friend, and you can be as technical as you like, and oh, you don't understand what this is? Well, here, let me explain this material to you. And all of this is being live streamed. You can do it without insult. You can do it in any other way. And by just the right timings of how you do the questions and how you frame stuff, what you want to put on display between your opponents who can't get past that stage versus you, that you are aware not only of what the science data is, but you know what they know. Able to bounce back and forth from that frame. That's why familiarity with the creationist literature. I was asked once by my sister Marcia, who's the mother of the niece I was just with over in Seattle, and once after she'd read borrowed some of the Philip Johnson books, and she couldn't get through them all. I said, my God, how do you read this crap without just, blah? And I'm going, oh, the more you have, the merrier. From a methods point of view, there's just a gold mine. that the worst person on earth to deal with is the one that says, I don't believe in this evolution stuff. That's it. Why? And you can't figure anything out about it. Or they've signed the Discovery Institute Descent from Darwin list. They are skeptical of natural evolution and all that. Well, so why?
Yeah. That
start telling you.
Yeah, that list.
Jump in.
Oh, sorry. That list has a host of issues. Just, I mean, namely, I think it's funny there are people on the list who asked years ago to be taken off. But
to be taken off the list, yeah. That's going to be my next book after I finish the second Phileas Fogg novel. It's going to be. Let me get my blurb here.
While you're waiting, I will distract you with my juggling skills, and also.
See, as I did with Slam Dunk, I thought, okay, what is a hole in the evolution defense wall that no one's done before? And I go, duh, the reptile-mammal transition. And after that, then I thought, well, okay, intelligent designers in particular, but occasional creationists will lob, oh, the scientists who are skeptical of Darwin, aha, have you heard about this? And they will link to this thing like, oh, gee, you've got a complete surprise. So my book is going to be A Most Uncommon Descent, The Curious Saga of the Discovery Institute's Descent from Darwin. And there's been only one that's been done. It's at Rational Wiki, where at least they took the trouble of alphabetizing everybody. That's as a starter, and they did the best they could to try to find out the background for some of them. But we need more than that. So what I'll be doing is
also
really diving in.
That's a little bit wrong.
As I said, they're not infallible, whereas I am infallible. Haha. At the very least, I'm really careful. The thing is I've got another issue that's popping up is I've been keeping multiple lists of the Discovery Institute list. There was one from 2007 and then a bigger one in 2008 and a bigger one in blah, blah, blah. And so it went from like 800 to 900 to 1100 names. I think that's the current listing. Now think about that issue. The first thing I noticed when I downloaded the PDF, and by the way, they're only available as PDFs, names. It turns out immediately when I looked at the list, I spotted identical to the one in all the other lists. And the last page seems to be identical. Where are the new names? The top, they're not putting them at the bottom. Where are they putting the new names? It's more pages. Somewhere sprinkled in between, somewhere, they've littered these new names. Not alphabetically. Of addition, they're just put, and I don't know where. So what I will be doing is starting out. I already have a spreadsheet organized. In fact, if I may be blunt, can I do a screen share? Let me see if I can. There we go. Let me do a screen share, and I'll show you progress. Zot, we're staring. That's my bibliography. You can see that thing of that. That's the master spreadsheet that I was just working on. I've cataloged 22,445 technical papers that have been written by 60,073 scientists. There's the 8,175 anti-evolutionist things, of which 3,595 are younger or intelligent design, and then 4,580 are young Earth creationists. And then there's a bunch of breakdowns by volume and listings and whose side did what and all. The other file over here, let me open that up. Discovery Institute list, which should be down. That's there we go. Discovery Institute signatories. So what I'll be doing, breakdown of where there's going to be the 2007 list where I'd started up, and it's all going to be in alphabetical order. And I'm listing what their specialty is and the university they're listed with and any other blurbs they stick in there. The university they're listed in is not necessarily where they're working, but sometimes it's just where they got a degree. But then that means that I can now start putting clusters together and put everybody together. Yeah, by who
they did that with David DeWitt.
Yeah. And this is going to be for the 2007. And then what I'll do then, once I've got that whole thing done, then I'm going to go into all the later ones and see who's been added and where they were added. And my sneaking suspicion, I can now stop share, like so. My sneaking suspicion is that they have intelligently designed the names to be as hard to find as possible. Name search in a PDF now, so that's not a problem. But you know how difficult it is if you want to really find somebody. The best way is if it's damned alphabetical.
Mhm.
Do that. So that's immediately suspicious. And then what I'll be doing is I'll be following up on the technical career and publication history of all of them, and to figure out who's doing what and how many of them are in different fields, and if any of them that I know are young Earth creationists that are on the list. Baumgartner's on the list, and I think there's a couple others on there that I already know that are full-blown young Earth creationists, and they're skeptical of Darwinism, and they have a PhD, and so they're on the list.
Ooh.
The vast majority of them, I suspect, are just kind of squishy, generic, intelligent designers. But I know there's a big cluster at the University of Oklahoma. 3 of them right off the bat, and I assume they know each other. What, you know, they never over together. So that way I can build up new levels of network. And the other point is the theme of that book will be, okay, what's happened since? Have this anti-evolution framework, and we know the scientists on the list. What have they contributed to understanding a damn thing? And how do they stack up compared to what we know the actual scientists, and of course those 1,100 scientists, ooh, that's a lot, isn't it? Remember my 22,000 technical papers? Those are written by over 60,000 scientists. In other words, way bigger than their stash. And if you weed out the ones that are irrelevant, the mathematicians, the industrial engineers, the industrial chemists, the philosophers,
astrophysicists.
Physics does bump into it. That actually can fall into that ballpark. I mean, so somebody that you, Ross, and that he's actually been published occasionally, he would actually fall into that ballpark. And a few slip in under the wire. I discovered from talking to somebody online, actually tracked down, Casey Luskin has had one little technical paper that he was published with. It's on a geological subject. It's when he was a postgrad studying geology stuff as one of his little side disciplines. By training, he's a lawyer, so he isn't really a geologist. And so because it's technically on an evolution nexus theme area, he gets on the list. Boop. And even by that loose standard, there's only like 120 people that manage to fall into that ballpark. It's just trivial. And not one of them can be said to be heavy hitters in the field.
Yeah.
Players at best.
Yeah. 2 things. First thing, I included a link to the video by Don Exodus on this paper, this petition, in the description below. He talks about some of the problems with it. But also, I did some research because I looked at the article, the scientific descent from Darwinism, because I saw his video, and I thought it was very funny. Because it's on Rational Wiki, where they list, is what you were saying, they list all their professions and whatnot.
Yeah, that's the only one. Yeah, so it's the big one.
Yeah, so one of them, I imagine, I guarantee, let me say it this way, they do it for more than one guy, but they associate this person who may have been only peripherally associated with some institution, but what they put is this person X worked at the most prestigious institution that they're connected with.
Dembski got listed, I think, as Cambridge. A degree there, he got a thing legitimately, but no, he's not working at that spot. No, and there's a certain amount of grade inflation that pops up in there. I'm a truculently honest clown. I have a BA in history from Eastern Washington University. That's it. I do not teach at a university. I do not have any credentials in that, and I do not claim to, and the like. But I do claim I get my work and facts straight, which is quite a different kettle of fish. But the thing is that no one's really done a proper analysis of that gang to try to taxonomize who falls into what category and see how many of them are in what kind of disciplines and fields and the like. And that's all measurables. It's laborious to do, but it's all measurable. You don't have to guess at somebody's role in the sciences. You can measure. All I'll need to do is to look at, I keep track of all the ones that are side that are anti-evolutionist. And whereas you can find a bunch of people that have published in the field, how many of their works would you be citing to discuss creation evolution issues? And it turns out I have a whopping 2. There's one paper that Mark Tolleman is in, and I discussed that. It's in tip 1.7, where he's a microbiologist, and he's not it's just perfectly normal biological work. It doesn't dispute evolution or anything. It pops up in Michael Behe in relation to the imipenum thing, and so everybody can find that at tip 1.7 at www.tortuga.wordpress.com. Blah blah. Anyway, Tolleman is a creationist of uncertain nature. Really. Although the one little piece he did, which I go into, is thing on the biogenesis thing, where he was relying on a 50-year-old book that was just, I mean, it's charming, but antiquated. That he has never actually said much about his creationism, so you don't know. But the thing he did was posted at a full-blown young Earth creationist site, which is kind of stuff that's friendly to Kent Hovind. And so it wouldn't surprise me that he's a young Earth creationist, but he sure managed to hide it well. Then the other one, from the University of Georgia, he is a full-blown young Earth creationist, and is and has published tons on it. You've already bumped into him, I know, from the Human Chromosome 2 issue and all that kind of stuff. And he's actually a more formidable character because he's very specific kinds of material. In fact, even Denise O'Leary over at Intelligent Design Land actually linked directly to his Answers in Genesis paper, apparently not noticing that she had just done that. So she's kind of breaking that third wall that Intelligent Design does, which basically likes to keep in-house. They don't like to deal with anything outside of their little enclave, except, excuse me, you just cited a young Earth creationist on his own home turf. Didn't you spot the web link? Do you not know what the Answers in Research journal is? It's their technical journal. And it's a fascinating one to look at. If you've seen much of their articles, they're imitating that kind of +1 style. Biocomplexity does it too. There's always been a thing in creationism where they imitate the adults. And they make their formats, their page formats. Sometimes they would copy nature, sometimes they would copy science. Now it's copying PLOS. So that if you look at biocomplexity, they've done exactly the same formatting. They've just changed some of the graphics, but you know.
Yeah, I know.
Form of flattering.
Yeah, I know. I saw a paper by Andrew Snelling. Can't remember the paper. I know it was on Answers in Genesis. I ran across it one time. For
he's got quite a few. In fact, a couple of these new ones I encountered were journals in there, and I you have to keep up with it because they keep.
But yeah, he wrote a paper. He wrote a paper where it is like in the style of a real research paper, because it starts, you got the abstract, you have the word, or like the
they know how to do it. Well, Snelling doesn't have to guess at this. He's published in regular science journals. He's had listings of stuff that's popped up. He's done geology work. He does it still to this day. If he takes his creationism hat, never challenges any of the assumptions, he can do perfectly fine peripheral, lower level work that nobody pays any attention to, because it's not very important stuff. And that was the thing that is fun about it. But you see, oh yes, the nasty evolutionists keep the creationist material out. They won't publish a real paper that actually challenges the paradigm. Give them that. We get to see what they think is science. As to what Andrew Snelling would like to have published in Science magazine, he publishes in their own journal. So he does exactly what, I'm assuming he's taking his best shot. He's doing exactly the work that he would if he were getting it through Science. And so we get to look, and I get to track down the sources, source fed it. And the reason why it would never get published in a regular journal is because he would get through a meat grinder of peer vetting, where they would be saying, no, you're making this bald assertion, you're not paying attention to relevant information, you're not dealing with what would change your mind and what's contrary, what are problems with your hypothesis. Excuse me, back to the drawing board, Andy. He doesn't have to do that in his own in their own journals.
Yeah, there was a website I came across where it was the guy who was comparing articles written by creationist Andrew Snelling against articles written by non-creationist Andrew Snelling, and he was comparing these things. It would say, like, because Andrew Snelling does stuff with like uranium in certain geologic layers. It's like he wrote a paper on like Precambrian layers in Australia, and so he mentioned he says he's got a thing,
and he goes off on garnets. That's another one of his things that he's had a field day.
Yeah, he's talking about this layer is so and so billions of years old. and he's talking about the stratigraphy of it and all that. And then the guy who wrote the article, I'll have to find it because I can't remember where I saw it now. But the guy also puts up Andrew Snelling from Answers in Genesis saying that like all the strata were laid down by the flood, and he says, "So which is it, Andrew Snelling?" Which article?
And some go a little overboard. It could be No Answers in Genesis. That website does an awful lot of those cross comparison kinds of things. A lot of fun stuff there. But I'm very cut a slack thing that I don't believe that Snelling is lying.
Oh, you're right.
For the regular geology
No
journal.
Answers in Genesis. You're right. I'll link in the description below.
Yeah. It's almost like I know the material really well.
Here it is by Dr.
I know where the
Ritchie.
stuff comes from. Yeah. Let me. Matter of fact, let me take a look at that. Let's see if I've got it in my
okay. So here's a
thing
link.
in there. The name rings a bell. RITCHI. See, this is how I navigate the world. Moving past my memory. Let's see. Boop, 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 boop.
There you go.
Alex Ritchie.
Alex Ritchie. Yep.
I don't have that specific one, but I do have a thing, Creation Science and Free Speech from 1997. They did it for the National Education. And that's all I have as his one and only. So actually, I might kind of like to see that link. Put that in the group chat over in here.
Yeah.
Because I can take a look at that. Remember, I want to add everything to tip. My brick wall gets bigger and bigger and bigger because everything gets put into the maw. But what Snelling would be doing, I would predict, the geology text, he is bowing to the received wisdom. Amazing what he says. He wouldn't be saying the so-called Precambrian, but he just says the standard view of the Precambrian or something like that. He would be phrasing it in such a way that he's not violating his own beliefs. At the same time, he knows that if he tries to do anything to the contrary, he's going to be swatted down like a bug. I don't have to bother about that aspect. He can be swatted down like a bug on his own turf. You look at his primary arguments presented full bore at Answers in Genesis, his technical papers, and start analyzing them. I pointed out, in fact, on my birthday, I was whiling away the hours, traipsing through a bunch of Andrew Snelling papers. As a matter of fact, give me a second and I'll go grab the things and I can tell you about them.
Okay. I am actually working on a book for those interested. I'm trying to get it published. It's already copyrighted. Just the publishing process has been a little bit difficult for me. They say it's too technical for a lay audience. So we need to petition some company and maybe we can get them to publish it. What do you say, guys? Let's do it.
This may indicate to you why nobody had ever done this before, but let's take a look at Woodmarap and Snelling, the igneous layers, bodies on a young Earth. And this was a paper he co-authored with our cute little friend John Woodmarap. Now, when you get back down to here, was the first page, and then the notes. Through page after page after page, tracking down all the primary sources, which generates this. Just the first page material cited by Snelling and Woodmarap, and then follow-up materials. And so I was looking up all this stuff, most of which I was able to get full text. And that's going to then be the framework of a source analysis of exactly what I've done in Slam Dunk on exactly the same methodology. Because if somebody's got their head up their ass about it in no uncertain terms, and then there was anything, it was a shorter one, Radio Halos in the Shep Granite, that's a 2009 paper. And then another one, they did regional metamorphism within a creationist framework, what garnet compositions reveal. That was from 1994. He presented that at a creationist thing. And they've reached the stage now where most, not all, but most of their core arguments are open access somewhere or other. PDFs and things, theoretically, every little schlump like me can go through them and that kind of an analysis. And my contention is when you do that, you're going to see where their brains are fogging up at the primary source level. Some of it you can deal with just in terms of the overall structure. What really struck me about this paper that he did with Woodmarapp, a big chunk of it's really old. 1960s and 1970s in a paper being done in the 1990s. And in geological work, whoa, that's kind of antiquated. And sometimes it's even older stuff. And sometimes I'm really lucky being able to glom onto things. And I already know that both Snelling and Woodmarapp can misrepresent source material. The only way you find that out is to read the source material. Now, I think they're doing it sense because what's happening is they're trawling for ammunition. Argument they want to be true, and they scavenge through the source until they find a little snippet that, oh, there it is. Ooh. And the reason why I know that is because I used to do that in my old pathetic Velikovsky days when I got high school and into college. And so I know exactly what it feels like. That's why I can appreciate what Richard Milton was doing as a parasitical scholar, my poster child for scholarly incompetence. Relatively little minor guy on the scheme, but from a methods point of view, he's very diagnostic. And because I knew I used to do what he did, and nobody taught me how to do that. This was not an example of where I went to bad scholarship school and somebody said, oh, no, this is how you cite apologetically. This is how you misrepresent sources. No, no one taught me. That it was as natural as all get out, because you can feign erudition, somebody's other's argument. You're trawling for ammunition, skimming at blinding speed through a work, and all you're looking for is something that stands out as something, oh, that character string, oh, now, aha. And from your brain's point of view, you're saying, oh, here is the poor benighted jerk who doesn't realize the significance of this little admission here, and I am going to highlight that admission. That's the kind of mindset that you can get into on that. Well, that didn't survive sound methods teaching, where don't confuse primary and secondary sources, Jimmy. That's not how you do stuff. And so from a completely different direction, historiography, I know how to do where you distinguish between somebody using a secondary source or not. And just because umpteen people say it doesn't mean it's true. They could all be repeating the same shtick. And that can happen. And the older the material is, the greater the likelihood is that somebody will have corrected all of this, which means you've got to be up on the game. Citing something always piques my curiosity when somebody cites the 1995 paper of X. 1999 paper. Why are they relying on the older material? So getting that newer material, then you can see whether they're cherry picking something and whether or not they're literally missing, led to those later papers and have led to subsequent research. So it's all under the general category of follow-up. It's waste of time. The odds are you're going to find, I'm sure you found this in your own research thing, where you learn things you didn't know you didn't know. Down something.
Yeah.
And the more you link up on that, you build up a more and more powerful network in your head, and now you remember things easier. You link up information because you're viscerally connected to it because of the research you did.
I think every time we come across, both times that I've asked you to look up a source for me or look up a claim, it's always led to something that's 1,000 times better than I could have ever hoped it to be.
Ooh, look at this. This is something even neater. Boom. And that I found on it, and that all goes into the system. That
fun
you
fact.
always want to have litmus tests. That's another thing that I found extremely useful. The diagnostic tools. In the old days, the Big Bang was an automatic diagnostic. If you are complaining about the Big Bang, you're a young Earth creationist, although not always. The other one is the thermodynamic argument. If they're complaining about the second law of thermodynamics, they're most likely a young Earth creationist, although you've now got weird Grenville Sewell over in Intelligent Design Land who's been blathering on about that. So now you could theoretically be outside of that framework. But I guarantee you, if they complain about radiometric dating, creationist, that's a litmus test. All the other stuff, intelligent designed jargon, but they won't necessarily know anything about it. Some of them will use buzzwords. The ones that are saying, well, you think that everything came from mud, they're probably running in that kind of Kent Hovind level.
It rained on the rocks, and then the rocks came alive.
Yeah, and so that's revealing by their rhetoric they're dealing with. You, Ross, will be operating in a very different kind of a frame, even though they'll both be making the same class of argument, but they're going to be using a different set of rhetoric. So the worst situation is that when you bump into somebody, especially if you're one-on-one or one-on-five, you come into an area and you don't know the playing field, and suddenly they're throwing jargon or material back at you, and you've got to kind of flail around for a response. No, that doesn't work well. Whereas if you know their field better than they do, you are on the turf deciding what little veil they're coming up, and you can figure out what trapdoor is available and what anvil to drop on them, because you know their field better than they do.
Fun fact for everyone. So the first time that I employed RJ to look up or to fact check something for me was, long story short, at a geology convention. The claim, there were some creationists there, and this lady claimed that the average dinosaur size was that of a sheep. And so I asked RJ. So Savannah and I got back to Baton Rouge later that night, and so we asked RJ to look up that claim for us. And again, long story short, it turns out that claim originated in Michael Crichton's The Lost World. So the origin,
just a writer.
Yeah. The origin of this claim, which for them is central to getting dinosaurs on the ark, originated in a sci-fi novel. That's
just a guess. And what was fascinating about it, now what you do on those sorts of things, the standard operating question, you don't have to launch off with it, but you got to get to it eventually, is, oh, says who? Some form of that. You can phrase it whatever way suits you most comfortably. But if you don't get to that stage at some point, you're missing a huge opportunity, because suddenly your opponent is in this fog bank and you don't have him located, or her, on the landscape of the data stream. Around it to find out where they're coming from.
Oh, yeah. And by the way, anyone can still look it up. The Answers in Genesis article, where they argue for not the average, but the median dinosaur size, being that not of a sheep, but that of an oxen, but that's not really the issue here. Where they cite Michael Crichton's book is still there. You can still find it if you.
Oh yeah.
If you go, I bet
that's where the daisy chains.
I bet I can find it.
That's where the daisy chains are absolutely fascinating. Daisy chaining is just pathological in secondary source addicts, because they find a blip of information they want to be true, and if they are trusting the source, they can cite it, but it never dawns on them to check it out. As you heard in my response on the thing, it's not immediately an obvious thing to say what the average size of a dinosaur means. Mm-hmm. By species, by volume. I mean, would you have to count up all the animals that existed and then take their average? Because would it matter if you've got 100 different species, but 5 species are all over the place because they're really popular, and most of the species have relatively small population sizes? How does that figure into the average thing? Do you take them at the generic level? Do you take them at a family level? You can do all sorts of ways of measuring stuff. And if you look at it, kind of is what would you be likely to encounter wandering around in the Mesozoic? You're going to be wandering into animals that are at least the size of a rhinoceros. Not, but then again, everything starts out as little teeny babies. So you can imagine that you could keep them as little eggs or little infants aboard the ark and save all the space. And some creationists take that dodge. So who cares what the average size of the animal is?
Yeah, it's pretty useless. I found it. I found the article. It's from 2015. It's authored by Dr. Timothy L. Clary and Jeffrey P. Tompkins on February 18, 2015. It's titled "Determining Average Dinosaur Size Using the Most Recent Comprehensive Body Mass Data Set." And I will include a link to that in the description below.
C-A-L-R-E-Y?
C-L-A-R-E-Y, yes.
R-E-Y? So
you can see.
You got to find out if it's in there. And there we go. Yep, I got him in there. 2015. That's an Answers in Genesis Research Journal paper.
Okay, here's
got it in there. Yeah.
Here's what it says. It says in the introduction, the notion of dinosaur size being that of a sheep probably originated in the secular scientific literature, where Horner and Lessem, 1993, have claimed that most dinosaurs were smaller than bulls, and in popular literature, where Crichton, 1995, has stated that they were the size of a sheep or a pony.
Good scholarship within limits, and they can acknowledge that sort of thing. And that's why it's fun to see the cases where there's a bit of house cleaning in the anti-evolution community, and you find that, frankly, Answers in Genesis does a bit of a job on these things, that they do try to weed out the silliness. So they have postings to say, don't use the argument about the lunar dust myth, it's wrong. Don't use the argument about why are there still monkeys, this is a misrepresentation of taxonomy, this is a bad argument, don't use it. Counter people who keep on using it means they don't read Answers in Genesis.
Well, Kent Hovind read the Answers in Genesis articles and then sent them arguments against it anyways, which kind of caused a falling out with them.
Hovind is in his own little worldview, and that's one of the reasons why you can be fairly said that Hovind is such a wackaloon that even the normal creationist wackaloons regard him as a wackaloon. How nutball do you have to be off the Answers in Genesis reservation?
Yeah. It's been over an hour. We're ready to cut it.
Oh yeah. It's
okay. All right.
So we can put up. I hope this was a useful discussion, and I'll still put up. You can put up the link to just put up the link to the regular tip website, because if anybody has got flush, they can just go to that, and they can find the links to all the book things at Amazon.com and the ebook versions and all of that. And as a starving, pathetic old writer trying to make a midlife crisis change of course here, and to do work that nobody's ever done before, you can, I hope, attest to the fact that they will not be wasting their money if they get Evolution Slam done.
Okay, I will definitely include a link to it in the description below. Thank you very much for coming on today, or tonight. And thank you everyone for watching.
Hours there. Glad you're not underwater from hurricane flooding and all that. And
we didn't really get all that much. Well, we got some,
that was a
lot.
nice thing. It got a little bit. My sister lives up in Alexandria. Was okay on that, so she had just moved into a new house last year, and I didn't want her to be flooded out, because mildew and all that crap, that's the difficulty. And you short circuit your car, it can render it, you have to buy a whole new vehicle and all that. So even if the water just comes and goes to 6 feet and then disappears quickly, it can still screw up your insurance thing if you don't have the stuff for it.
Yep, indeed. Okay, well, thank you very much everyone for coming, and we will be signing off now. So, bye.
Bye. We're off the air now.